welcome to the Fit and Healthy Today show. And on the heels of our discussion on antibiotics last time, and since one of the repercussions of antibiotic usage is yeast and candida infections, I thought I would address that today because they kind of work hand in hand together. However, as we're going to review through, there's a lot of things that can cause candida and yeast. Number one, obviously, is going to be antibiotics. That's where we see it most readily. Because remember, antibiotic means anti-life. So antibiotics will go in and kill trillions and trillions of these good bacteria, and then you end up with something called yeast overgrowth. Now, yeast, what is it? Most people are like, what is it? I look on my toenails and I see this miscolored, and my doctor tells me it's because of candida and because of yeast. And what it is it's an overgrowth of a single-celled fungi. And what it is it is a fungus. It's always found in low amounts in the intestinal and tracts, and you need a little bit of yeast for balance. I mean, God didn't create it for no reason. It does provide things, but when it gets out of control, once again, it has its purpose. When it gets out of control, then you end up with yeast overgrowth. And it's kind of interesting, a lot of people will complain that it definitely has a smell. It almost smells like yeasty bread. Hence, when you turn around and eat a lot of bread products that are full of yeast and you ingest them, it can cause an overgrowth of yeast, particularly in the digestive tract. So we're going to talk about it in diet, but boy, when you can look for things that are yeast-free as much as you can, that would be the best thing from prevention of yeast overgrowth. Now, where it gets into a problem is it will overgrowth into the mouth and the ears and the nose. People will end up with chronic sinusitis. You'll see it in the toenails. It gets in the bloodstream. When it's systemic candida, that means it's throughout the body. And it just finds little homes, and it just waits for you to feed it sugar. Because its simple carbohydrates are its food. Yummy, yummy, munch and crunch. So if you're eating a high sugar diet, you're feeding yeast. If you have yeast, you can't eat a high sugar diet if you want to get rid of it. So, the symptoms that are associated with yeast that we typically see for women a lot when they're on antibiotics are recurrent vaginal yeast infections. And they definitely have that yeasty kind of smell. They're itchy, they're burning, they're very, very uncomfortable. Most of the drugs that they use for these are, once again, they kill off the good bacteria and everything comes about again. So there's treatments that you can do for vaginal yeast, and we'll talk about some of the supplements later on in the show. Now see, most people, they sometimes end up with these mystery diseases of inflammation, inability to concentrate, their memory starts to go, because when systemic yeast takes over the body and you're having these sugars going in all the time, you're going to get those issues along with gas and bloating. You'll end up with constipation or diarrhea or a combination of both. Headaches, allergies, PMS. Your immune system goes downward because remember 80% of your immune is in your bowel, and if it's overloaded with yeast, then that means the good bacteria aren't in there to help produce or replicate. They're overwhelmed actually by the yeast, and so then your immune system goes down, your ability to manufacture serotonin goes down, your ability to break down your nutrients. So we see things with hypoglycemia, blood sugar disruptions, and I believe it can be a major contributing factor to hypoglycemia and to diabetes. There's some studies on that, and we had addressed it before that a lot of alcoholics, a good percentage of them, over 90%, were or are hypoglycemic. They have blood sugar issues. Athletes' feet will typically see it, itchy, scratchy, and it's difficult to catch athletes' feet if your body is in good immune system running order. So if you're in the shower and everybody's showering off in the locker room, you're not going to catch the yeast if you don't have a susceptibility or your immune system is there. It's not going to happen. Thrush, that's in the mouth. Real common in babies particularly. And what that means is they don't have enough good bacteria in their body, and they get this white filmy looking stuff on their mouth. It's kind of itchy, it burns. Once again, only in the mouth versus vaginal cavity. It can, over the long haul, cause inflammatory of the bowel, eczema, a lot of skin conditions. It can make you hypersensitive to everything. So first line of defense. If you've got a lot of these things going on in conjunction, you might want to contemplate getting rid of the yeast and doing some diet modifications, as we're going to discuss further on. Causes, as we discuss, antibiotics, corticosteroids. If a person is doing corticosteroids, particularly those nice little Flonase and other things in their nasal passages, I've seen systemic yeast develop as a result of those. They cause the immune system or the body's ability to replicate good bacteria to dive. Birth control usage. Yeah, people don't think about that. That raises it up. There's a lot of medications such as nystatins and other meds, fluoride, other things, chlorine. They all destroy the good bacteria that can allow for yeast overgrowth. Consumption of refined carbohydrates or excessive amount of fruit juice drinking. A lot of people think they're doing their body really good by drinking those big old glasses of juice throughout the day. But I have to tell you, a little bit of juice is fine if you're not diabetic, but it definitely feeds yeast because it's pure sugar. Eating the wholesome good fruit with the fibers and the skins and things like that that are on fruit, much better alternative. Improper hygiene can cause systemic yeast to occur. Unlike most people who have the belief that it can be transferred sexually between partners, most of the research that I came across says, no, it cannot. So if your immune system is good, it isn't going to be sexually transmitted between partners. If your immune system is poor, possibly could be. There's other IgA or immune system deficiencies that can occur in the body that can allow yeast to take over. So the yeast can kind of cause it, or it can be caused by immune system issues because your body can't identify friend from foes. Allergy, chemical exposures. Once again, I was talking about the fluorides, especially the type of fluoride that's found in our water that's a toxic chemical. Chlorine, which we have and we can smell and throughout our water unless you have a water filter. And then allergies in combination with that corticosteroids can make very, very yeast receptive. Because remember, allergies are chronically causing your immune system to always be in heightened order and taxing the immune system. But once again, yeast can cause allergies, allergies can cause yeast. You know, don't know whether you got the dog before the cart or the cart after the dog. When we talk about diet, and this is if you have yeast and we're trying to fight off the yeast, or you know you have a tendency towards having yeast or candida overgrowth, these are some real diet suggestions. I know this is really tough. Number one, avoid all sugars and refined carbohydrates. These yeasts, they send out a little chemical message to your brain and they say, feed us, okay? And so what happens is your brain all of a sudden wants increased carbohydrates in order to feed yeast. And it keeps in an ongoing process about the yeast making you want carbohydrates, the carbohydrates feed the yeast. It's a vicious cycle. Most people can get off of most simple carbs and sugars after about usually between 2 and 3 weeks, but boy, it's tough going on. And there's some supplements we can help with sugars in that regard, but getting off sugars, juices that feed it, number one. Number two, eat mostly vegetables, whole grains, preferably not yeast-based. Now, it is a myth that brewer's yeast causes yeast overgrowth. That, I found nothing to back that up. But there are certain yeasts that replicate, like in breads and things like that, that can be a contributing factor to bowel yeast, that can just cause the problem to get worse. So we want high-quality proteins, including lean chicken and fish, as well as beans. But interestingly, I found in most research is beef can be a contributing factor, interestingly enough, to autoimmune and immune disorders, beef and pork both. If you have immune compromise as well too, but immune compromise beef, don't eat pork. You're going to want to stick with a higher quality source of protein with lots of veggies. Eating fermented dairy products like kefirs, yogurts, buttermilk, but not milk. Milk is not a cultured product. It has a lot of sugar, a sugar called lactase. And so you drink a glass of milk, and diabetics of all people should never drink milk because it's full of sugar and it can feed yeast. The cultured products tend to balance out because they do have some good bacteria. Not enough to overwhelm and get rid of yeast, but enough to keep the food that you're eating from contributing to the yeast. Supplement-wise, oh man, number one beyond anything else is going to be probiotics. Those are the good bacteria that can help overwhelm the yeast. The only problem is if your body, particularly your intestines, is full of yeast, in order for the bacteria to deep seed, you have to get it gone. So the dietary changes, and there is tons and tons of research on oregano and grapefruit seed extract, and naturopathic doctors and homeopathic doctors have used these types of products, maybe not in their extracted form, for centuries. So unlike some of the yeast-fighting drugs out there that causes problem to get worse eventually, this is anecdotal evidence that supports that things like oregano extract and grapefruit seed extract kill yeast. Garlic, phenomenal as a yeast killer. Goes in there, well, phenomenal for a lot of things, blood pressure, cholesterol, my gosh, keeps things from building up on the vascular system. It's an antimicrobial, and I'm coming at it from the aspect of it's an antimicrobial. It kills viral, fungal, and bacterial infections. If you like your garlic, there are deodorized supplements out there that you can take that won't make you smell, that will do the job and helping keeping the yeast under control. Otherwise, if you like garlic and no one around you is offended, do it. Podiarco, we have a local physician that whenever he sees toenail fungus, besides getting the good bacteria and trying to get people to get their sugars down, since he's a proponent of a lower carb diet, he will have his patients soak their feet in something called Podiarco. Now, I've seen success with Podiarco and tea tree oil, which I didn't write on here, that you can topically apply that can help with things like toenail fungus. The only problem is most yeast, by the time it's in your toenails, it means it's systemic. It's in your bloodstream, it's there. So it takes a lot more than just putting a little bit of tea tree oil and Podiarco. Yeah, we can get rid of it for a little time being, but we need to treat the whole body with the diet modifications as well as trying to get rid of the yeast. Interesting enough, too, as a side note, the people that tend to have higher yeast will get salmonella poisoning quicker, food words, and flu much easier. It really draws down. So, good multivitamin, high in B vitamins, good extra amount of ester C, which is a vitamin C that stays in the body a good 12 to 24 hours. We're trying to boost the immune system and the body being able to identify a friend from a foe. And since most people's diet doesn't contain these types of vitamins in good wholesome amounts, the good multiple vitamin, I'm not talking from the grocery store, I'm talking a good multiple vitamin, along with some ester C really can help. In addition, interestingly enough, the ester Cs are natural antihistamine, and since most people that have yeast have more allergies, this can also help with the allergies. Essential fatty acids. Now, what's really interesting, and I ran across a lot of good research, and we know that they help with blood sugars, inflammatory response, and cholesterol, and a lot of other things. Flax oil, fish oils, and certain types of, especially like almonds, they actually prevent the fungus from causing cellular DNA, RNA damage. So those people out there who are eating a lot of good fats in their diet, be it the nuts like almonds or avocados, fish, and in my case flax oil, sesame oils, there's all those types of good fatty acids really help your RNA, DNA. It protects it and protects those healthy cells from yeast and bacterial damage as well too. Oxygen drops. Boy, I know these have a lot of different usages, and there's different ones. Cell food, there's oxygen. I mean, you can look and you can get food-grade types of oxygen. And what this basically does is it destroys the fungus, because fungus does not like an oxygenated environment. Just like cancer doesn't like oxygenated environments, and most bad bacteria do not as well. Oxygen is a natural destroyer of those things that are bad for our bodies. So obviously exercise as well too, definitely